So today we're talking about anxiety and specifically how to overcome anxiety. And this is something that I know really well. I've dealt with anxiety most of my life before I started coming into and connecting and living from my heart in the world. And the thing with most people, myself included, that have anxiety is that the most common way people deal with anxiety is that they sweep it under the carpet. And I was exactly the same. I didn't want to admit that I had anxiety. I wanted to just push it down and not actually acknowledge that it was there, and try and live life despite the anxiety. But the thing with pushing it down is that eventually it's going to come up. And then what happens when it does come up and becomes like really, really big, what most people do is that they'll go and seek help. So they'll try out a psychologist or a counsellor, maybe a psychotherapist. And for me, that route didn't work. It actually used more of my mind to try and control the anxiety that was happening in my mind. And it just led to more anxiety going down that route. So the other thing that people do is that they'll try meditation, right? But again, it's using the mind to try and resolve the mind. You'll go further and further into what's called a beta state rather than a relaxed alpha state. And when you go into that beta state, what happens is that then you get more and more anxious. Why is that so? Because the head's engaged more and more. So these are the usual things that people try. And in my experience anyway, most of them don't work. I have clients come to me every week that are in a similar space. They've gone those routes. They've tried pushing it under the carpet, tried to live life with it, but it starts to come up. They've tried the psychologists, the counsellors, the books, the meditation, the programs, all of that stuff, and they've still got this anxiety. So what to do about that? And just a little bit about my story. Like, it was probably 25 years ago when I was at university when the anxiety really grabbed a hold of me. And I was really successful on the outside anyway, but on the inside I was like, had so much tension, and like I'd actually go red in the face and my heart would like beat around people really fast. I'd get confused around people and like a little bit scattered all the time. And I didn't know what that was about. And I was doing like 2 degrees, engineering and commerce, so it was quite a full-on course. I was like a champion athlete, winning medals at the national titles. So I had a lot of this pressure on me, a lot of it self-imposed. But it became too much, right? No matter where I went, I was feeling anxious and tense. And at the end of it, what happened at the end of the anxiety is that I got burnt out. And I don't know if you've ever been burnt out before. Maybe you are managing your anxiety. But if it keeps going, it actually gets worse. And what I found at the end of my anxiety is that I got burnt out and I couldn't function. I couldn't sleep at night. I couldn't think clearly. I got confused all the time. I didn't know my sense of self anymore. It's like my whole identity crumbled. And for the most part, I was like in bed, with the windows closed. It's probably why people go through chronic fatigue syndrome. I didn't have chronic fatigue because I did something about it. But that's my sense, is that the adrenals get burnt out with people that are trying to manage their anxiety. So for me, what happened, I started seeing the psychologists, the counsellors. None of them worked. I went to the library, to the self-help section, and I could get out 20 books. I remember getting out 20 books on anxiety and those sort of psychological aspects of the anxiety. Read through them, studied them, made notes, tried the practices, but it didn't work. And I was lost. I didn't know what else to do. I was like, I can't go through the rest of my life feeling like this. Something has to change. And it was one morning, probably about 2 a.m, I woke up in a cold sweat, because that's what was happening in my body every night when I could actually sleep. Woke up in a cold sweat, and it's all dark in my room. And I had this flash of going into nature for 12 months. And that was the only place that I could feel peace, was in nature. So I had that flash. I thought, no, that's a stupid idea. I can't do that. I've got to finish my degree, right? I have to put my identity back together. But instead, this idea this insight, this impulse wouldn't leave me. So eventually what happened is that I went back to university, told the head of the department, look, I'm going to go and take a 12-month leave of absence. Told my friends, told my family what I was going to do. A lot of them thought I was a bit crazy for doing it. What are you going to do? Just surf all day? And that's what I did. I bought a tent and a surfboard, got in my car, filled up with 2-minute noodles. I was like early 20s at that stage. And drove out of my parents, because I was living back at home, I couldn't function anymore with the anxiety. Drove out of my parents' driveway and went down the coast. And actually went for 12 months up and then back down the east coast of Australia. And it was a transformative period of my life, and it's sort of led me to doing what I do now with the heart coaching and the Head to Heart program with people. But what happened after a couple of weeks, I was just in the flow of life. It's like my head had finally, like without all the distractions, just being immersed by myself alone in nature. What happened is that my head started to go quiet. And what happened then is that all the anxiety that I was feeling dissolved, and I could sleep again because I wasn't engaged in my mind so much. And then what happened, in this space of no mind, I started tuning into my body, into my feelings, into my heart. And it was one day on this beach on the south coast of New South Wales, and it was probably 11 o'clock in the morning. I'd had breakfast, and I felt this pull on my heart to go down to the ocean. And it was a deserted beach. There was no one there. And the sun's, like 11 o'clock, a little bit up in the sky. It was a hot day. Walking down the beach, being guided by my heart. And I don't know what happened, but it was a long sandy beach. And I bent down to pick up these grains of sand. And I'm looking at all of these grains of sand on my finger and just being with the grains of sand. And what I could notice is like every grain of sand was completely different. Like it was different size, different color, different texture. And I'm being with each of these grains of sand. And then, I don't know what happened, but I looked up at the whole beach. And that's when it happened. Like I got to see that the whole beach was made up of these individual grains of sand. But it was the individual grains of sand that were the beach. And I don't know what happened, but this sense of oneness kicked in, that there was no separation between me and the beach. There was a lizard over in the sand dunes, and I could feel what it was like for its metabolism to get more active in the sun, and how it felt for scales to move over my back. There was a white-bellied sea eagle flying above, and I could feel the sensation of the pressure of the wind under his wings, and the telescope eyes looking down, and in the breakers there was like this fish, and I could feel the sense of weightlessness and the water going through my gills. And difficult to explain, but I had a sense of oneness with all things. And it's like the sense of separation between myself and life just disappeared. And a lot of religious texts talk about this, a sense of oneness. A lot of spiritual texts talk about this sense of oneness. But in that space, there was just no room at all for anxiety. Like anxiety cannot live in a sense of oneness. It just doesn't exist, because it's all about connection and peace and love. And that's what happened for me. And over the next couple of weeks, I was immersed in that for probably 3 to 4 weeks. And then it slowly, like I had some responsibilities. I went back up into my mind for a bit, came back into this experience of the heart connection, went up into my mind, and it sort of fluctuated. But then I wanted to stay in that space all the time. So I started to deconstruct. What was it that took me out of the anxiety space and into the peace and the calm and the love and the wisdom and the connection? What was that? So I started to deconstruct it. And I came up with myself for like 6 steps that I could practice to take me from my head back into this space, like from the anxiety response back into this space of stillness and peace and oneness and connection and love, joy. And then I started practicing those. And what I noticed is that over time, I could go back into that space at will. Like if I went to the supermarket and I got stressed out, I could go back into this space. And when I went back to university after these 12 months and finished my degrees, I noticed the anxiety kept coming up because I went into my head. But because I deconstructed what I actually did, and I could follow that like a step-by-step system to come back into my heart, come back into the connection, come back into the love, come back into the joy of being in my heart and living from my heart. And it was a couple of years later, probably in my mid-30s, people asked me like, David, what is it that you're doing? You have this sense of calm about you. You have this sense of peace about you. What is it that you're actually doing? And I said, well, I've put together these practices that I use to come into this space rather than this space. So I started with a couple of friends and did this little workshop, and they came into that space. And then whenever they got anxious, then they could come back into this space whenever they wanted. And then it just sort of grew from there. I created a business around it, and now I hold that space for clients to come back from the anxiety response, coming back into their heart and back into the connection. So if that's what you'd like to do, if you'd like to explore that, then I encourage you to be in touch. Somewhere on this page you can book a call. And the thing with anxiety is that it's pervasive. Like, people that come to me, they're like, look, David, from the moment I wake up right to the moment I put my head on the pillow, I'm in this space of anxiety. I feel tension in my body. It's like my mind can't turn off. I can't get any peace. Even at night when I put my head on the pillow, I'm ruminating through all of the things that happened for that day. How can I actually come into a sense of peace? And that's what I do with them. Like, I run them through these 6 techniques. And it's pervasive because, like, when they're with people, there's anxiety. When they're by themselves, there's anxiety. When they're going shopping, there's anxiety. When they're thinking about what happened, there's anxiety. When they're thinking about what's going to happen, there's anxiety. So it's pervasive, and it starts to impact all areas of your life, like the relationships, right? You get tense around people. It impacts your finances. Oh, I'm too scared to put myself out there, or I'm too scared to ask for a raise or ask for a promotion. So it affects you financially. It impacts your health. Like, for me, I got burnt out, all the anxiety, like my blood pressure went up, and I couldn't sleep. I got burnt out. So it affects that. It impacts all areas of your life, relationships. So if you're sick of it, sick of the anxiety, it doesn't have to be that way. It can be shifted. I've shifted it. Hundreds of other people have shifted it through coming into the program. And the way to do that, the next step, is to book that call. So just book a date and a time, fill out a short questionnaire, and we can get you moving. We can get you out of this anxiety response. We can break it with those 6 techniques. And the great thing about breaking it is that then you come into an experience of life that's more at peace. Okay, and you come into an experience of life that has more joy. You come into an experience of life that has more connection, experience of life that has more love. Not that you're trying to create them with your head, but you naturally come into that space when you're in your heart. And you can always choose then to go back into your head, but you'll probably go back into anxiety, right? But if you want to experience a completely different way of living your life, then I encourage you to be in touch, right? You can go and immerse yourself in nature like I did for like 12 months, and you may or may not find your way back to your essence, back to your core. Or you can fast track your results, be in touch, get on this call. It's a powerful call, goes for 45 minutes, and we can get to the truth of like what's actually happening for you around anxiety. It may not be as bad as what you think it is. We'll get to the truth of where it is that you'd really, really like to be in your life. And we'll come up with some steps on how I can help you make that journey. So if that's what you'd like to do, somewhere on this page, you can put in a date, pick a date and a time, fill out the short questionnaire, and we'll connect on a video call, most likely on Zoom. And it doesn't have to be this way. You don't have to be in anxiety. You can shift it like I have, and so many other people have as well, by coming into their heart. So if that's what you like to do, go ahead, book that call. Thank you for watching this video. I'm David Stiles, and I look forward to connecting with you soon.